Here, I got my notes, check. Pepsi, check. Sunglasses, check. Hat, check. Ink on my finger. And the most important thing, thick skin, check. Let's go. Let's go. Golden Blue Dude back with another video just for the college football fan. So hit that like and subscribe button if you are a college football fan. And go check out our Patreon page when you get a chance. A lot of perks over there. And don't forget our score prediction contest will start back up again in September. Every week we award $20 to whoever gets the closest to the exact score prediction of the game that I pick. The higher the Patreon, the more guesses you get. And you can win as many times as you want. Also, $5 and up Patreons get to pick the live stream that we're going to do. And you get to watch the game with me. And we have a great website designed and created by Joey Foster. This video I want to talk about Steve Sarkisian at Texas, and things got off to a very rocky start for Steve Sarkisian. In the first place, I don't understand why Texas fired Tom Herman to hire Steve Sarkisian. Tom Herman was actually doing really well at Texas. They were holding that letdown year from a 10-win season to 8-5 over Tom Herman's head way too much. He went 7-3 in the COVID year. That's pretty stinking good. What do? They fire him, bring in Steve Sarkisian. I mean, what credentials did he have? Like part of a season where he was okay? So you fire a coach that has things turning around, and bring in a coach that really doesn't have anything that they've proven so far. I think the main thought that went into that is Texas knew that they were going to the SEC and they wanted an SEC guy, dadgummit stupid ink, to come in and help ease them into the SEC. Well, that has totally backfired. Last year, Texas did horrendous. Not just 5-7, a losing season, but check this out. First game of the season, Louisiana win 38-18. That's a good start. But then they went on the road to Arkansas and got blasted 40-21. Came back home, beat Rice 58-0. Then they whooped Texas Tech 70-35. Then went on the road, took care of TCU 30-27. So a 4-1 start. That's not bad, but that's when things really fell apart. So the next game was Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry in Dallas, and they had that game wrapped up. But then Oklahoma came roaring back and beat them 55-48, and that was start of a 5-game losing streak for Texas. But then the next game was a home game against Oklahoma State, lost a close one 32-24, went on the road to Baylor, lost another close one 31-24, stayed on the road to Iowa State, got blasted by Iowa State 30-7, then the game at home against Kansas where they lost 57-56 in overtime. Maybe the worst loss in Texas history. Then they go on the road, get beat by my Mountaineers 31-23 in a close game. Came back home, finished off the season with the win against a good Kansas State, 22-17. But overall, 5-7 with a loss to Kansas. That's a horrific year for Texas. They did well in the transfer portal, finished number 5, and of course, Texas recruits at a high level, so they have the talent. So let's look at this year's schedule. What kind of a record could Texas have this year? Well, they start off the year against UL Monroe. That's an easy win. They get a home game against Alabama, and Texas fans think that they have hope against Alabama, but I'm here to tell you, you do not have hope. Alabama will blast Texas. That's a loss. You get a tricky UTSA game. That's not a gimme game, but I'm giving the win to Texas. You go on the road to a bad Texas Tech. I'm giving the win to Texas there. Come back home to West Virginia, and surprise, surprise, I'm actually giving you the win against my Mountaineers. Then for the Red River rivalry, where I think Oklahoma once again beats you in Dallas and sends your season into a little bit of a tailspin. Not as bad as last year, where you ended up losing 5 in a row, but it's still not good. You get Iowa State at home. I think you beat Iowa State. I don't think Iowa State's going to be any good at all. You go on the road to Oklahoma State, who I do think takes a step back this year, but it's on the road. I'm giving it to Oklahoma State. You get a much needed bye week, but then another road trip to an up-and-coming Kansas State. I have you losing to Kansas State. Come back home to TCU, where you beat a bad TCU. Back on the road to Kansas, where you get your revenge against Kansas. And then back home to get beat down by Baylor. So I have Texas finishing 7-5. Is that enough for Steve Sarkisian to keep his job? In my opinion, it shouldn't be. But I don't know what Texas is thinking, so I have no idea. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're smarter than that they realize this was a bad hire. So it's time to move on from Steve Sarkisian. Who do they get to replace Steve Sarkisian? Well, there's several candidates, but who fits the mold for Texas? First, there's Dabo Swinney. Could they entice Dabo Swinney from Clemson with that Texas money? I don't think so. If Dabo Swinney does leave Clemson, it'll be for Alabama. Next name on the list, Jim Harbaugh. It is possible that Texas could go out and try to get Jim Harbaugh with that Texas money. But Jim Harbaugh is still trying to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. So I think the chances of Texas reaching out and trying to get Jim Harbaugh are slim to none. Next name on the list, Luke Fickell. Now this one is interesting. Luke Fickell has made a name for himself at Cincinnati. Got the first ever Group of 5 to the playoffs last year when he guided Cincinnati to the playoffs. So maybe Luke Fickell is looking to take the next step. And it wouldn't be that big of a chance that Texas would be taking. So the chances of them going after Luke Fickell, I think, are halfway decent. And I think Luke Fickell could have decent success at Texas. But he's still not the highest name on my list. The next name on the list, Ryan Day. It's just not happening. I just put him on the list because he's a big name and Texas is a big name. But that's not happening. The next name on my list, James Franklin. And I think James Franklin is a better coach than people realize. But he's had a couple of down years at Penn State. He would have to have an amazing year at Penn State for Texas to even think about James Franklin. And I'm not sure that James Franklin would be interested in Texas. Next name on the list, Mark Stoops. And guys, Mark Stoops does not get the credit that he deserves at Kentucky. Kentucky is historically a bad football program. And he has them having winning seasons, getting to bowls, and they finished second in the SEC East. This year, they could finish as high as second in the SEC East again. However, I think the competition is going to be a little bit stiffer this year, so I have Kentucky falling just a little bit. But Kentucky will still be an 8-4 or 9-3 team. Is that enough for Texas to take a chance on Mark Stoops? I don't think so, and I'm not sure that Mark Stoops would be interested in Texas. That's just way too much pressure. He's a made man in Kentucky, so I don't see that happening. Then there's the last name on my list, Lane Kiffin. This is very interesting. Lane Kiffin does have a rocky past, but right now he is doing excellent at Ole Miss. We all know he was the coach for Tennessee, and he left like a thief in the night to USC where he failed. So he went crawling back to Alabama, begging Nick Saban for a job, which was granted. Proved himself at Alabama, and lo and behold, a Group of 5 team, FAU, reached out to Lane Kiffin, and Lane Kiffin was once again a head coach. But Lane Kiffin wasn't satisfied at FAU. He wanted to move on up again, and Ole Miss came a-calling, so now Lane Kiffin is the head coach at Ole Miss, and he's doing pretty stinking good at Ole Miss. Last year, they went 10-3, a 10-win season. This year, they'll probably have another 10-win season. I don't think they'll win the SEC West just because of Alabama, and I think Alabama will be even better than what they were last year. But I think Ole Miss is a lock to have a 10-win season this year. Ole Miss did well in the transfer portal as well, top 5. So I think Ole Miss is going to be a pretty good team this year, and Lane Kiffin will build his resume even more, and it will attract the eyes of Texas. I think if Steve Sarkisian goes anything under than 8-4, and I think he will go under 8-4, he gets the boot. And I think Texas will most definitely be interested in Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin will be a shot of energy, excitement. It'll create a ton of buzz around University of Texas. I mean, let's face it, when they hired Steve Sarkisian, it really wasn't that big of a buzz. It's like, oh, well, okay. Looks like a lateral move, but hopefully he does well. No, with Lane Kiffin, it'll be exciting around Austin. And I think he's a good fit for Texas. He has that Texas arrogance about him already. He likes those high-scoring offenses, and we know Texas is all about that right now. And he's been working on his defense game. Last year, Ole Miss defense was much better than the year before. So I think Lane Kiffin would actually be a perfect fit for Texas, especially going into the SEC. Lane Kiffin has proven that he can have success not only in the SEC, but in the SEC West. Before Hugh Freeze, Ole Miss was just kind of floundering over there in the SEC West. Hugh Freeze brought them back to prominence. Of course, he was shamed out of Oxford. In comes Lane Kiffin, and more success for Ole Miss. So Texas would be more confident in Lane Kiffin because he's an actual head coach that's had actual success in the SEC West. So yes, I think it would be a perfect fit for Texas and Lane Kiffin, and I really don't think Steve Sarkisian is going to do any better than 7-5. And if Texas doesn't fire Steve Sarkisian after 7-5, then I don't know anything, because I thought I knew Texas better than that. So I think that Steve Sarkisian will get fired at Texas, and I think Texas goes after Lane Kiffin when that happens. Is that an actual prediction? It's pretty close to one, but we'll see if Texas can surprise us and have a better year this year. I'm still sticking to it. That was a horrible hire for Texas. What were you thinking? So y'all let me know in the comments section. Number 1, Do you think Steve Sarkisian gets fired after this season? Number 2, if he does get fired, do they get Lane Kiffin? That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.